She wasn't supposed to matter. When the guards dragged her through the gates of Topkapi Palace, bloodied from the journey and stripped of everything she'd known, no one looked twice. She was just another slave girl, a captive from a faraway land, Ruthenia, one of dozens brought in to serve, to kneel, to disappear. But the moment she stepped onto the polished stone of the palace floor, something was off. The other girls trembled. She didn't. She looked around, not like someone trying to survive, but like someone measuring, calculating. It wasn't fear in her eyes. It was curiosity and ambition. Her name was Alexandra. But in this new world, they called her Hürrem, the cheerful one. A cruel irony, considering what was about to unfold. Within days, strange things started happening. A senior concubine, who had mocked Hürrem, mysteriously fell ill. Another, who tried to sabotage her, was suddenly dismissed from the harem without a word. And yet Hürrem, she was still there, quiet, watching. At night, she would walk the cold halls alone, humming songs from a land that no longer existed. The guards whispered, "There's something wrong about that one." But they didn't know the half of it. You see, Hürrem didn't just want survival. She didn't want safety. She wanted to rise. And rising inside the Ottoman palace, that meant walking through shadows, smiling through lies, and turning enemies into stepping stones. She studied people, listened more than she spoke. She learned what made them tick, what made them tremble, and slowly, without anyone realizing it, she began weaving herself into the fabric of power. The Sultan's eyes soon found hers, and once he did, he couldn't look away. But here's the part no one saw coming. This slave girl wasn't just clever, she was dangerous. And before long, the most powerful women in the palace, the ones who had laughed at her, would come to fear her. Because Hürrem didn't need a crown to rule. She just needed time. And she had all the time in the world. In the Ottoman palace, survival was an art. A glance could condemn you. A whisper could erase your name. For the women of the harem, every breath had to be calculated, every smile rehearsed. And most, they just wanted to get through another day without being noticed. But Hürrem, she wanted to be seen. From the moment she entered the harem, something felt wrong. Not because she was loud, not because she challenged anyone. Quite the opposite. She was polite, gracious, even sweet. Too sweet. She greeted rivals with kind eyes. She listened deeply and remembered everything. What each girl feared, what made them jealous, who their allies were, who they thought they could trust. And all the while, she was climbing, not with force, but with charm that cut like a dagger hidden in silk. The women whispered, "She's not like us." And they were right, because Hürrem didn't want to be a concubine. She didn't want the Sultan's affection for a night. She wanted the throne behind him. It started subtly. Late-night conversations with the palace eunuchs. A gift left anonymously for the Sultan's mother. A well-timed compliment to the right advisor. And then, Sultan Suleiman saw her. Not just looked at her. Saw her. He was supposed to spend one night with her. That was tradition. A single encounter. Then move on. But he didn't. He called for her again. And again. And soon, his most trusted consort, Mahidevran, noticed. At first, Mahidevran dismissed it. A passing fancy, she told herself. But Hürrem was patient. She wasn't trying to please the Sultan. She was trying to understand him. She spoke softly, but her words struck deep. She asked him questions no one dared ask. She laughed when he was silent, and in her laughter, he found something the throne could never give. Freedom. The palace held its breath. Because this slave girl, this foreigner, was winning the Sultan's heart. And with every step closer to Suleiman, she pushed Mahidevran further into the shadows. But here's the part that chilled the entire harem. Hürrem didn't gloat. She didn't taunt. She didn't need to. She simply smiled as others unraveled. Mahidevran's temper boiled over. One night, she attacked Hürrem, scratched her face, tore her veil, screamed for her to leave the palace. But the next morning, it wasn't Hürrem who was punished. It was Mahidevran. The message was clear. Hürrem wasn't going anywhere. And that's when fear set in. Not because she was violent, not because she raised her voice, but because every time someone tried to stop her, they vanished. They lost favor. They were demoted, or they simply disappeared, names erased from the registry, as if they never existed. And Hürrem, she just kept climbing. She wasn't just surviving the harem, she was redefining it. And the women who once ruled its golden corridors now walked silently, eyes down, praying that whatever power protected her would spare them, because the harem had seen beautiful women. It had seen clever women, but it had never seen anyone like her. In the palace, smiles were weapons. A soft word could kill. A gentle nod could sentence someone to exile. And no one mastered this silent warfare better than Hurrem Sultan. By now, her position was rising. She was no longer just another face in the harem. She was the favorite, the chosen, the one Sultan Suleiman called for again and again. But instead of basking in comfort, Hürrem did something terrifying. She played the long game. At first, it looked harmless. She would hand a shawl to a shivering maid, offer kind words to a weeping concubine, whisper prayers for the sick, leave gifts for the elderly servants. But there was one thing everyone eventually noticed. Wherever Hürrem gave, something, or someone, soon disappeared. A concubine who had once laughed at her, suddenly gone from the morning lineup, transferred to a distant palace, or worse, never seen again. A head servant who had mocked her accent, reassigned, silenced, vanished. And the one she helped, promoted, trusted, loyal. Hürrem didn't rule by force. She ruled by placement. She arranged people like chess pieces. Every smile, every gift, every seemingly kind gesture was a calculated move. One of her most chilling strategies was her use of information. She never shouted. She never threatened. She simply knew things. Secrets whispered in the dark. Affairs hidden behind velvet curtains. Rivalries between concubines. She knew who hated whom, who owed debts, who was on the edge of scandal, and she used it all like poison in a goblet, just enough to paralyze. One day, a young servant, bold and naive, mocked Hürrem openly in front of others, laughed about her peasant roots, said the Sultan would soon grow tired of her. Hürrem didn't react. She smiled. That same evening, a gift was delivered to the girls' quarters, a box of sweetmeats wrapped in golden ribbon. She never touched them, because she never made it to bed that night. By dawn, she was gone. Her name struck from the roster. Her belongings burned. No one dared to ask what happened. Hürrem's power wasn't in what she said. It was in what she didn't have to say. The palace began to shift around her. Rooms fell silent when she entered. Eyes lowered. Steps slowed. Because everyone realized. Her kindness wasn't kindness. It was strategy. It was warning. Every word she spoke felt like it had a shadow behind it. And every step she took echoed louder than orders from the Sultan himself. And what terrified them most was not that Hürrem destroyed her enemies. It was that no one could prove she had ever lifted a finger. She moved like smoke, left no fingerprints, no evidence, just empty rooms and frightened eyes. Because in this palace, survival was earned through silence. But Hürrem, she didn't just survive. She erased. In the 500-year history of the Ottoman Empire, no woman had ever been married to the Sultan. It simply wasn't done. Concubines, yes. Favorites, certainly. But a legal wife? That would mean status, power, influence not just over the Sultan, but over the empire itself. And yet, Hürrem did exactly that. The announcement shocked the palace. One morning, a quiet murmur passed through the marble halls. The Sultan has taken her as his legal wife. At first, they thought it was a rumor, a mistake. But when Hürrem walked into the imperial court that evening, adorned in silk, standing taller than ever before, they knew it was true. This slave girl had become Sultana Hürrem. But here's the part no one could explain. How did she do it? She didn't raise an army. She didn't poison her rivals. She didn't even raise her voice. And yet, one by one, the most powerful women in the palace bowed to her. Viziers avoided her gaze. Even the Sultan's own mother, once the most feared matriarch, now tread lightly in her presence. Because Hürrem had done something far more terrifying than threaten. She had become untouchable. Sultan Suleiman, the most powerful man in the known world, listened to her. He asked her opinion on matters of war, alliances, religion. He let her advise him on matters of state. And she never overplayed her hand. She would sit silently beside him in council, saying little, but watching everything. Then later, in private, she would speak, softly, and by morning, decisions changed, orders reversed, names erased. You didn't need to be told Hürrem was in control. You felt it, in the tension that filled the air when she entered a room, in the fear behind a vizier's smile, in the way the Sultan's enemies suddenly disappeared, and no one dared to ask why. She had no official title in the court, but her presence, it was everywhere, and that's what terrified them the most. She didn't rule like a tyrant. She didn't shout or strike. She didn't need to, because power whispered in her voice. And when Hürrem whispered, the empire listened. Some called her a witch, others a seductress. But those who really knew her, the ones who watched her rise, watched her replace women who once ruled, they called her something else. The queen who never needed a throne. Because what made her so feared wasn't what she did. It was what people believed she could do. And in the shadows of the palace, that belief, that silent terror, was more powerful than any army. By the time Hurrem Sultan grew old, she had no rivals left. They were either buried, exiled, or erased from memory. Not by her hand, not by her sword, but by something far more frightening, her silence. She didn't need to speak anymore. She didn't even need to move. Just the sound of her name, whispered in the marble corridors of Topkapi Palace, was enough to make the most powerful men lower their voices. Her body had begun to fail. She was no longer the radiant young woman who had bewitched a sultan. Her steps were slower, her breaths shorter. She rarely left her chamber. But power never aged. Servants still bowed deeper in her presence than they did for princes. Scribes still brought her sealed reports before anyone else. And foreign ambassadors still asked, "Will the red-haired sultana approve?" Because even now, especially now, no one dared cross her. There's one moment the palace never forgot. A young vizier, newly promoted, overly confident, once questioned Hürrem's influence in court. He laughed in a private meeting, said she was just an old woman with old stories. The next morning, he was gone. No trial, no explanation. His name erased from court records. When asked, no one spoke, because they all understood. She didn't need to give the order. She only needed to exist. What made her final years so chilling wasn't her presence. It was her absence. She stopped appearing at court. She rarely met with the Sultan. But her shadow, it stretched longer than ever. Advisors paused before making decisions. Concubines flinched when gifts arrived. Everyone watched the wind, wondering if Hürrem was watching too. And here's the darkest part. She had become an idea, not a woman. A force. A ghost. A memory wrapped in silk, whispered behind curtains, feared like a curse. The power she built had outlived her youth. Her beauty. Her words. It had become something elemental. When Hurrem Sultan finally died, the palace didn't rejoice. There was no relief, no celebration, because something far more terrifying settled over Topkapi that day. Silence. A silence that stretched across courtyards, that slipped beneath doors, that wrapped itself around every throne and every heart. She was gone, and yet her presence felt heavier than ever, because they all knew. This slave girl, this foreigner, had bent an empire to her will, not through violence, not through armies, not through screams, but through patience, precision, and a silence so powerful, it still echoes today. Final message. She was always 3 steps ahead. They said she was dangerous, a manipulator, a temptress, a foreigner who wormed her way into the throne room of an empire. And maybe they were right. But here's the truth that no one dares speak out loud. People didn't fear Hurrem Sultan because she was cruel. They feared her because, even in silence, she was always 3 steps ahead. From the moment she arrived at Topkapi Palace, a chained prisoner from a conquered land, the others laughed. They saw a peasant girl, a slave, disposable. But Hürrem didn't fight them. She studied them. Every smirk, every whisper, every betrayal. And while they plotted to survive the day, she was already planning the year. When others used beauty, she used memory. When others used charm, she used silence. And when they finally realized she was winning, she was already beyond their reach. One by one, her enemies fell. But they didn't fall to daggers. They fell to doubt, to carefully placed rumors, to favors that came with invisible strings, to gestures so small no one noticed until it was far too late. Even the Sultan, the man whose word could raise or destroy nations, listened to her, not because she begged, not because she threatened, but because she understood something no one else did. True power isn't taken. It's built quietly, patiently, layer by layer, like a trap you didn't even know you stepped into. People feared Hürrem because she didn't play the game. She rewrote it. She transformed the harem from a battlefield of beauty into a palace of politics. She made allies out of ghosts, turned kindness into weapons, and buried her threats without lifting a finger. And when she grew old, and the fire in her body began to fade, her power didn't. It lingered, like perfume on royal robes, like footsteps in a corridor where no one walks. Even after death, she remained the most whispered name in the empire, because her story wasn't about cruelty. It wasn't even about love. It was about calculation and the unshakable fear that every move you made, every word you said, every alliance you trusted, she already knew it. She had already seen it, and she had already chosen what would happen next. So yes, they feared Hurrem Sultan, not because she screamed, not because she punished, but because she never had to. And by the time you realized you were in her game, you'd already lost.